If only they knew who was crying inside the sacred drum, they wouldn't have opened it during the festival.
They say the night the sacred drum was opened, the stars went dark before anyone could scream. Listen carefully. What happened at the Grand Oshun Night Festival is the kind of story that does not leave you. Not when you sleep, not when you eat, not when you hold your children close and pray for silence. It started with smoke. Thick, white smoke pouring out of something never meant to be opened. The dancers froze. The talking drums went silent. Thousands of people in bright wrappers and beaded headpieces stopped breathing at exactly the same moment. Because from inside that drum, something was crying. Not one voice, many voices, layered on top of each other like a river carrying too many secrets at once, rising and falling, broken and endless. The elders screamed, the crowd pushed backward, children disappeared into wrappers. And in the middle of all that smoke and fear, one young man stood closest to the drum, shaking, eyes wide, sweat on his face even though the night air was cool. His name was Jide Afolayan. Poor, hungry, 19 years old. And from inside the open drum, among all those crying voices, one sounded exactly like his. 3 days before the festival, Jide was nobody. He lived in a cramped riverside room with his sister Amara. One window, one mattress on the floor. Zinc sheets above their heads that leaked when the clouds turned heavy. The room smelled of damp cloth and yesterday's fried yam. But Jide had his hands. Every morning before the sun was fully awake, he dragged his bucket to the edge of the river road and drummed. Not a proper drum, just an old paint bucket with the bottom pushed in. But the rhythm that came from those hands stopped people mid-step, made children forget where they were going, made old men nod without knowing why. He drummed for coins, sometimes none at all. Above the street, enormous festival banners hung between poles, red and gold, polished performers smiling down on roads they never walked. Boys Jide's age in clean rehearsal clothes passed him without looking. He watched them. That burning, heavy thing in his chest lived between hunger and shame. Amara saw it too. That evening she touched his shoulder and said, "Some doors shine because something evil is burning behind them." Jide said nothing. But he did not forget. Amara was the kind of sister who remembered everything, including things Jide wanted buried and forgotten. She sat across from him that night, wrapping leftover rice in old newspaper, and spoke their father's name. Jide Afolayan. A man who had worked near the festival grounds for years, as a cleaner, a carrier, a man who swept confetti before dawn. He started asking questions, Amara said, about the drum, about where the money really went, about names called at midnight. She folded the paper tight. He died 6 months later. They said it was fever. Jide looked at his hands. Papa had no talent. I do. Talent is not armor. Neither is silence. Silence keeps us poor. They did not argue after that. The room grew quiet the way rooms do when two people love each other but cannot agree on a single thing. That night, Jide lay awake in the dark. Outside, the rehearsal drums beat faintly across the city, distant, festive. But underneath that sound, under the rhythm and the warm night wind, he heard something else, soft, broken, like a child crying somewhere below the ground. He told himself it was the river. He almost believed it. The next morning, everything changed. Jide was drumming his bucket at the edge of the main road when a black car slowed beside him and stopped. The window came down. A man leaned out, not old, maybe 30, with designer glasses and a shirt that probably cost more than a month of Jide's coins. His name, Jide would learn, was Vale. He watched Jide drum for 2 full minutes without speaking. Then, where did you learn that? Jide stopped. Nowhere. Myself. Say stepped out and handed him a card printed in gold ink. Festival Cultural Director, Grand Oshun Youth Platform. You have something raw. I can make it shine. He looked Jide over once, the way a tailor measures cloth before cutting. I place talent on big stages. Jide held the card with both hands without meaning to. Say walked back to his car and paused at the door. But understand this before you call me. His voice dropped. If I open this door for you, you must never ask what happens behind the curtain. The car pulled away. Jide stood alone in the dust, the gold card warm in his palm, his heart hammering against his ribs. The compound Say brought him to was a different world entirely. White walls, security men in black, polished floors, hanging lights, expensive perfume mixing with fresh fabric. Girls in sequined wrappers practiced turns. Boys tightened proper drums while managers whispered into phones. Jide wore his best shirt, the one Amara had ironed flat with a heated pot. He still felt like a smudge on a clean page. Saya gave him new clothes, pressed agbada top, leather sandals, a laminated pass on a lanyard. He watched the security guard step aside when he raised it. Something moved in his chest, warm and dangerous, like the first swallow of hot pepper soup on an empty stomach. He was taken down a corridor to rehearse. Halfway there, he noticed a heavy wooden door at the far end, old, iron-latched, carved with symbols he did not recognize. From behind it, so faint he almost missed it. A sound. Soft. Wet. Crying. Jide slowed. An older drummer walking beside him saw him pause. The man's face went pale immediately. He leaned close and whispered 3 words with the urgency of someone warned not to say them. That holds the sacred drum. Do not go near it. Saya sat Jide down the next morning and explained what he called the real rules. Smile when cameras are near. Thank every sponsor by name. Never look hungry, never look lost, and never, under any reason, walk toward the locked room at the end of the east corridor. He poured water from a glass bottle. The festival has layers. What the crowd sees is the top. Beautiful, loud, full of energy. Below that are arrangements. Who performs where, who wins, who gets quietly removed. You do not need to understand the layers. You only need to stay on top. Jide asked. And the sacred drum. Ceremonial. Sealed before the festival opens, unsealed after it closes. Not your concern. But I hear crying from inside it. Say studied him for a long moment. You're nervous. First-timers hear things that are not there. Jide said nothing more. But later, walking to rehearsal, he saw something he could not unsee. One of the most famous performers, a man whose face filled 3 enormous street banners, kneeling before an older man in white. Head bowed low, lips pressing the man's ring. Jide watched without blinking. Nobody else in the corridor even blinked. The older man was Chief Balogun, 56 years old, short but heavy, the way men grow heavy when money settles into their bones over decades. White, agbada, always. White cap, white shoes. He moved through the festival compound like a landlord inspecting his own property. Say introduced them in a cool private room far from the rehearsal noise. Chief Balogun looked Jide over without standing. Say tells me you have a gift, he said. Smooth voice, completely unhurried. I have turned gifts into careers, careers into names that outlive the men who carried them. He slid an envelope across the table. Money for your family, rent and food, a welcome gift. Jide stared at it. All I ask is simple. Perform when I say. Stand where I say. If anyone asks who placed you on that stage, say your talent did. He smiled. Because it did. I am only the door. Jide thought of Amara, of the leaking zinc roof, of their father's name on no monument. He picked up the envelope. Chief Balogun said, "The city only loves winners. Let me make you one." Jide said, "Yes, sir." Behind the locked east door, patient and low, the crying continued. The 2 nights before the main festival, the sacred drum was moved through the compound. 6 men carried it on a wide wooden frame, covered in thick black cloth, the shape beneath still visible. Tall, wider at the top, ancient. The carriers wore no shoes. They looked straight ahead. No one spoke a word. Every person in the corridor bowed. Some touched their chests. One woman stepped out of the passage entirely and pressed herself against the wall until it passed. Jide stood still and watched. He heard it clearly this time, crying from inside the cloth. Not one voice, several, woven together, rising and falling, the way wind sounds inside a narrow tunnel. He turned to the girl beside him. "You hear that?" She frowned. "Hear what?" "From inside it. Crying." She laughed softly. "First big festival. Everyone gets inside their head." But the old drummer from the corridor was nearby. Their eyes met. The man stepped close and spoke in a voice barely above breathing. "If the drum is crying to you, young man, it has already noticed you." Then he turned and walked quickly away, and Jide stood alone in the emptying corridor for a long time. 3 days before the main night, Jide performed at a street showcase near the festival grounds. A proper drum. A real spotlight. 300 people. His hands were shaking when he sat down. Then the rhythm came. It came from somewhere below thinking, the way it always had. His hands moved, and the drum answered, and the crowd began leaning forward without realizing. 2 minutes in, people were filming. 4 minutes in, a group near the back started dancing without being invited. When he finished, the crowd erupted. Not polite applause, something alive and raw. People shouted his name even though most did not know it yet. That evening, 3 bloggers posted the clips. By midnight, his face was on city pages. Amara sat with her phone and watched the videos quietly. When she lowered it, Jide saw something in her eyes that had been absent for years. Pride. Real and warm. And also, worry. She set the phone down without speaking. Then, just before they slept, an envelope was pushed under their door. Inside, more cash than they had seen together in one place. And a gold wristband stamped with the symbol of the sacred drum. The morning after, Jide learned about Tolu. Tolu Badmus, 20 years old. Rehearsing for the youth stage slot for 4 full months. Everyone in the compound knew his name. He was sharp, trained, and prepared. 2 weeks before the festival, his right hand stopped working. No injury, no fall. His fingers simply stopped obeying him, like something had quietly switched off the connection between brain and hand. He was removed from the lineup, replaced by Jide. When Jide heard this, the envelope in his pocket felt heavier without touching it. A backstage worker spoke quietly nearby. Tolu said he was warned, that the slot was already spoken for by people above. He refused to step aside quietly. Then his hand stopped. Jide said nothing. He told everyone who would listen. The worker continued. He said you took a place that was paid for in someone else's suffering. That evening, Jide sat on the edge of his bed and turned the gold wristband over in his hands. He examined the inner strap where skin would press against it. There was a stain. Dark, dry, old, blood. He set it on the floor and did not touch it again that night. Jide got lost 2 nights before the festival. A wrong turn from rehearsal led him through an unfamiliar door to the top of a narrow staircase going down. He should have turned back. He did not. At the bottom was a long corridor. No electric lights, just small oil lamps in clay holders along the walls. The floor was packed earth. The air smelled of old smoke, dried leaves, and something he could not name. On one wall, dozens of candles burned in a cluster. Before them, animal bones in lines, old carved masks hanging, black beads coiled like sleeping snakes. On the opposite wall, names, hundreds of them, scratched deep into wood, some fresh, some nearly faded, some with a single line crossed through them. Jide held his lamp closer. Near the middle of the wall, a name. The same letter slope, the same handwriting his mother once said was a family trait. Jide Afolayan. His father's name. Crossed out. He stepped backward and nearly knocked over the lamp. Then from above, footsteps. And C's voice, low and unhurried, speaking to someone in the dark. He is ready sooner than I expected. Then, silence fell back over the dark. Jide climbed back up and said nothing to anyone. He spent the entire next day watching with different eyes. Not the eyes of someone grateful to be included, but of someone trying to understand a game he had been placed inside without being asked. That afternoon, he passed a half-open room and heard two festival managers talking casually. The winner is already confirmed, 6 weeks ago. Does the boy know? No. But it does not matter. He is not here to win. He is here to give the crowd heat, make the cameras move. Jide stood completely still in the corridor. Then Se appeared behind him, as if he had been standing there the whole time. You knew I heard that, Jide said. Yes, Se said simply. What am I actually here for? Se tilted his head. The drum has been waiting for someone like you, someone whose hunger is real. Most performers here are pretending to be hungry. Yours is genuine. He walked away without explaining further. Jide remained in the corridor for a long time after that. For the first time, being chosen felt exactly like being locked inside a room where someone else held the only key. That night, Se came to Jide's room and sat down without being invited, without knocking. Forget what you overheard. The contest does not matter. What matters is what you do with the door that has been opened for you. Jide said. I found my father's name on that wall downstairs, crossed out. Se did not flinch. Men who worked around the festival leave traces. What happens to people whose names are crossed out? Silence. Se stood slowly. His voice stayed smooth, but something lay underneath it now, like gravel beneath shallow water. There is a midnight gathering tonight, small and private. It protects performers from things they cannot see. I want you there. And if I refuse? Se moved toward the door. Then pray the drum does not choose you while you are unprotected. He paused at the frame. Being chosen sounds like blessing. But the drum does not choose favorites. It chooses the hungry. And hunger without direction is simply an open door for other things that are also hungry. He left. Jide sat alone in the dark and thought about his father, about Tolu's ruined hand, about the soft crying behind the iron latch. He did not go to the gathering. The blessing ceremony was held the morning before the final night. Baba Folu, a respected elder drummer who had played every Oshun Festival for 30 years, was asked to lead the prayers. He stood before a small altar near the east corridor, eyes closed, hands moving gently over offerings in clay bowls. The sacred drum was brought to the edge of the room, still sealed. Baba Folu approached. His hand touched the cloth. The room changed. He stiffened, his grip tightened. Then a sound came from deep inside him. A harsh, wet cough. Then blood at the corner of his mouth. His legs gave way. People rushed forward, shouting for help. Jide knelt beside him. The old man's eyes found him, still aware, still fighting to speak. Jide leaned very close. The voice was paper-thin. Do not let them open it during the festival. The seal must hold while the crowd is still here. If thousands are feeding it their energy when it opens. A long, rattling breath. Everyone who ever traded truth for power inside this festival is already in there. His eyes went still. By sunrise, the incident had been quietly erased. Rehearsals continued without pause. Jide should have left. A small, clear part of him knew exactly what the right thing was. Pack the clothes, return the wristband, take Amara by the hand, and walk back to the riverside room and the honest, invisible life. He knew it. But then, the city called his name. A radio presenter mentioned him during the morning show. A fashion page posted his picture. A woman at the compound entrance said, "You are the boy from the viral clip. My daughter watches you every single day." She said it like he was something real, something permanent. He moved Amara into a solid room for 3 nights, walls that did not leak, a fan that worked all night. He watched her sleep soundly for the first time in years. He told himself, one more night, just the performance. Then they would leave everything behind and build something clean. He believed himself. That evening, changing into his costume, Amara came in and stopped. Something had slipped partway from his pocket. Small, round, threaded on thin cord. Black beads. She looked at him slowly, waiting. He took a breath. For the first time in their lives together, he lied to his sister. The woman Say sent him to lived beneath an abandoned market tunnel on the south side of the city. No sign outside. Just a narrow entrance between 2 long-closed stalls. The wood so dark with age it looked like shadow. Inside, thick herbed smoke, charms hanging from the ceiling, rust on every surface. Mamanla sat on a low stool, old, thin, dark cloth wrapped around her. Her eyes were open but reading something far beyond the room. She spoke before Jide sat down. It is not blessing that brings you. It is fear dressed as ambition. He told her everything. The crying in the drum, Baba Folu's dying words, the crossed names, the feeling of being chosen for something no one had explained. She listened without moving. Then, the drum is not calling you to honor you. It calls because your hunger matches its hunger. Empty things reach for empty things. She looked at him directly. I can make you strong enough to stand near it without being taken. But you will give something that cannot be returned. Jide asked what? She said, you will know what it was, only when it is already gone. She turned away. Jide agreed. He told himself it was only protection. A shield. He was not chasing power he had not earned. He was surviving what was already circling him. That is what he told himself. Mama Enla worked in silence. She placed a clay bowl between them and told him to press his palm to a thin blade. He did. The cut was small but deep. Blood dropped into the bowl, 4, 5 dark drops. She told him to speak his deepest desire aloud. Into the bowl. Just once. He opened his mouth and said, the real one. Not survival, not family. The true hunger he had never spoken to anyone. He wanted to be seen. Fully. Undeniably. Impossible to ignore. Mama Enla nodded as if she already knew. From folded cloth, she took a strip of old drum skin, dark, tough, smelling of age. She stitched it into the lining of his costume against the chest. From tonight, the drum answers your rhythm before anyone else's. But it will also hear every lie inside your heart. As Jide walked back through the tunnel, the walls seemed to breathe, and one voice from somewhere inside them said clearly, "Welcome." Festival night arrived like a storm dressed as celebration. The city came alive before dark. Drums from every direction, thousands filling the streets, beads and bright wrappers, phone screens glowing like fireflies, the smell of suya and palm wine and warm bodies pressed together under open sky. Jide stood behind the stage curtain, chest tight, hands loose at his sides. Then he walked out. The crowd was enormous in a way he had not understood until he actually stood before it. He sat behind the drum, closed his eyes for one breath, and began. What came from his hands that night was not normal. The rhythm moved through people. It found something underneath the evening noise and lifted it upward. Women pressed hands to their chests. Old men went completely still. Children stopped running and simply stood. When he finished, the roar hit him like a force. Videos spread across the city within hours. Critics called him chosen. People said his rise could not be explained by talent alone. Chief Balogun placed his hand on Jide's shoulder before cameras and smiled wide. Jide smiled back. But against his chest, the drum skin was burning, much warmer than skin should ever be. 2 nights after the performance, a story appeared on every major city page online. Not about Jide's talent, about his origins. The article claimed his story of rising from poverty was constructed by festival publicists, a narrative crafted for sympathy and reach. It said his discovery was staged, his raw emotion rehearsed, his rise manufactured by sponsors who needed a face people would feel sorry for. The comments turned within minutes. The whole thing was fake. We were manipulated. Another industry puppet. By morning, the same crowd that had screamed his name was using it as a punchline. Jide called Say immediately. Say answered on the second ring. "Who gave them that story?" Jide asked. Short silence. "I did," Say said, simply, calmly. "Why?" "People were starting to love you instead of just watching you. Attachment creates demands. That is dangerous for the structure." A pause. "You were useful, Jide. Do not confuse that with being safe." The call ended. Jide set his phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. Outside, low and distant, the sacred drum was crying again. Not frightening anymore. Almost like it understood exactly what he was feeling. It had been waiting. The festival's final evening was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became a public trial. Someone had organized a live confrontation, not quietly backstage, but on an outdoor platform where cameras were already running. A moderator Jide had never seen introduced people who took apart his story piece by piece before the crowd. Old footage, anonymous claims, half-truths wrapped carefully around real moments until every innocent thing looked guilty. Chief Balogun was nowhere in the entire compound. Sponsors issued a joint statement by evening. No special relationship with the performer in question. The crowd turned fast and viciously loud. His name became a chant of mockery, rising and falling like something ugly that enjoyed itself. Jide stood alone at the crowd's edge. He tried reaching Amara by phone. She was already pushing toward him through the mass of bodies, face frightened, hand stretched forward. He saw her. He should have walked straight to her. Instead, he turned and moved toward the east corridor. Because behind that iron-latched door, the crying was louder than he had ever heard it. Not frightening anymore. Familiar, like it recognized his pain. He pressed his palm to the door. Warm. He kept walking. He went back to Mamanla that same night, still burning with anger he could not contain. He did not want protection anymore. He wanted Say to suffer. He wanted the whole city to see what Sayvale really was. every deal, every stolen artist, every name scratched onto that underground wall. He wanted truth to pour out of Say's own mouth in public, before cameras, in a way completely impossible to manage or control. Mama Enla listened without any expression. Then she was quiet for a long time. "There is a way," she said at last. "Speak your betrayer's true shame into the drum through your rhythm. If the timing is right, the drum returns that shame to him publicly. He will not be able to stop himself from confessing." She held Jide's eyes. But the drum does not take one name alone. When you feed it a command, it opens slightly. Whatever comes through that opening does not ask whose side you are on. She said it plainly, without drama. "I am warning you." Jide stood. "He deserves it." Mama Enla's expression did not change. Deserve is a human word. The drum does not understand it. He left. One junior organizer, who had not received the ban order, allowed Jide onto a small platform near the main stage. He sat behind a drum. The drum skin against his chest was burning, hotter than before. He began to play, slowly. Not for the crowd. He let the rhythm sink low and deliberate, and inside the pattern, he wove the forbidden words Mama Enla had taught him, older than the festival, older than the city. He pressed Say's truest shame into every beat. Nothing happened for 2 full minutes. Then Say, standing 50 meters away near the camera cluster, phone in hand, went completely still. His phone dropped. He turned toward the nearest camera as if something had gripped his jaw. And then he began to talk. Not performing, just talking. Every deal, every stolen artist, a charity fund drained quietly over 3 years, a young singer who refused his terms and then vanished. One name that silenced the crowd entirely. The cameras stayed on him. Nobody moved to stop it. Within minutes, the city's online pages were burning. And behind the east corridor wall, deep inside the old iron latch, the sacred drum had begun to shake. The shaking started low, like thunder settling into earth. Corridor lights flickered, hanging decorations swayed with no wind. Performers backstage stopped mid-sentence. The air pressed against eardrums the way it does before lightning. Then people began to hear it. The crying. All of them now, not just Jide. Women covered their mouths, dancers huddled. One old man sat slowly on the ground and pressed his palms flat to the earth. Jide stepped off the platform. He could feel the drum skin against his chest pulling toward the east corridor. Not gently, like a hook in cloth, insisting. The east door was already shaking on its latch. Chief Balogan appeared from a side entrance, flanked by 2 large men. His white clothing was perfect as always. His face was not. His eyes held something Jide had never seen there. Fear. He pointed across the corridor, voice cracking through the noise. "Hold him! Do not let him near that door again!" The men moved. The crowd pressed from both sides. Thin white smoke already curled from beneath the door in slow, patient lines. Jide stopped. He looked at the door. He looked at his hands. He thought of Baba Folu's last words. The latch snapped. The door swung open. What came out was not a monster, not fire, not a spirit with a terrible face. What came out was sound. Hundreds of voices pouring into the corridor like water that had been held back too long. Crying voices, confessing voices. Some repeating one sentence endlessly, frozen at their worst and most shameful moment. The crowd stumbled back. Some people fell. Some covered their ears with both hands. But Jide stood still. He could hear each voice clearly. A young woman describing what she surrendered for her first stage slot. A man laughing about money never shared. A boy, maybe 14, saying he had not known the cost. Then he heard his father. Femi Afolayan's voice, tired and confused, asking whether Jide was safe, whether Amara was eating well. Jide stood very still and listened to his father for the first time in 7 years. Then, the last voice came. His own. Not his everyday voice, something deeper. Crying, already inside, already caught. The drum had not created the evil. It had only stored every cost, every dark deal, every silence that allowed cruelty to continue, every soul that traded truth for power and called it survival. Amara found him. She grabbed both his arms. "Jide, seal it, now." "I know what it costs," he said. "I know." She held tighter. "Choose truth." The voices poured from the drum. The crowd ran. The drum could only be resealed by someone willing to surrender the very thing they had chased. Not punishment. Proof that one person inside all this hunger had chosen differently. Jide removed the strip of drum skin. He let it go, that burning need to be seen. He opened the hand that had held it so long. He pressed both palms against the drum. The crying slowed. Stopped. The door closed. Silence. Chief Balogun was found the next morning unable to speak. He never recovered his voice. Seye gave interview after interview, correcting everything. Nobody asked. He simply could not stop. Jide and Amara returned to the riverside. He still drums, not for coins, not for cameras, for something quieter. And when festival pride grows too loud each year, soft crying rises from beneath the stage, not angry, only reminding. A child paused at the gate. "Mama, why does the drum sound sad?" Her mother held her hand tighter. "Because it remembers what the people forgot." Morale. Power borrowed from darkness is never yours to keep. Be careful what you open. Some doors, once unlocked, cannot be closed by the same hands that opened them. What would you have done in Jide's place? Was he truly redeemed, or was the ending still a form of punishment? Tell me in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales like this one.
If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded. One kept promise, one act of courage, one person who finally chooses to see. These things quietly change the world. Another story is coming very soon. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching.